morning, I find myself in a rather particular set of circumstances where it seems like life is a not necessarily empty concept, but I still wake up somewhat feeling aimless, even in situations where I would otherwise know exactly what to do. And I add more schedule, I add more things to do, things to accomplish in an attempt to mediate these feelings of aimlessness. And they work sometimes, but sometimes they feel like they're a remedy to a problem that doesn't necessarily exist, and or feel like a bandage treating the symptom rather than the cause. It doesn't really make any sense. I don't know. I guess the world is just a weird place. I'm at the best position that I've been, arguably, in my life. But I've got 2 weeks of free time, approximately. So you might get an update on my mental state in about a week. I just realized I talk rather stiltedly when I do these, don't I? Huh, interesting. I am struggling with the human condition, I guess you could call it, in that you live a life based off of meanings that you're meant to provide for yourself. You're meant to forge your own meaning as you go about life. And there's no such thing as inherent meaning, inherent truths, inherent anything. There's nothing given to you in this world. No guarantees aside from death and taxes. And only taxes because we live in a capitalist-based economy, which would be nearly impossible to escape from at this point in time, which we've already had that conversation. I think it's more of a question of how deeply corruptible or corrupted a capitalism-based economy can be. And I'm not really one usually to talk on politics. I prefer philosophy. Politics are too muddy. I feel politicians should stick to the politics. People who aren't politicians should probably try and keep their nose out of them. How do you become a politician? I have no idea. I have no interest in such things. What I'm interested in is a deeper philosophical understanding of the world, trading ideologies with people, trying to find new unanswerable questions in some vain attempt at uniquity. I think that my perspective on the world isn't really anything new. I don't think there is a such thing as original thought in this day and age. You just have to have a very basic idea that everyone can agree on and claim uniquity towards it, and then you become the next Walt Disney. Take a story that was already written and make it child-friendly, and suddenly you're a millionaire, billionaire, trillionaire. But why do people do these things? Was he doing it because he was seeking to bring joy? Or was he doing it because he realized it would become the veritable superpower of financial success that it is in the modern age? Is this everything he would have hoped for? Or is this going against his own basic ideology? Did we ever really know the person behind the mouse? And I don't really think that that's necessarily... I don't think it's fair to say that we would have ever known the true, full in and outs of a person who is already dead. In an age where we barely know people who are constantly in front of a camera, how are we supposed to say that we knew a person who, even though they quote-unquote poured their entire life's work into a very particular idea, it doesn't necessarily mean we knew all their ins and outs, or that their central premise was even reflected in their, what's the word? Their largest work, magnum opus, that one. I have a very basic central premise, and I think that those are the ones that end up being the easiest to stick to, yet the hardest to flesh out. Because if you say, I want the world to be a specific way, and I will do everything in my power to make it that way. Well, then you end up coming into other philosophical misunderstandings at a very basic level. You end up saying, okay, well, is it right for everyone to have to be subject to your ideas? And of course not. And then you end up saying, well, should we go with the utilitarianism perspective? Should we say that the needs of the many should outweigh the needs of the few? And a lot of people would agree with that, but then again, a lot of the people are the many. And also, we got that whole argumentum ad populum. It's not right to say just because everyone thinks something, it is necessarily what is correct. If you are going to try and restate your theses along the way, it doesn't make any sense to say, okay, well, I think this, therefore everyone should think this. The strongest way for humanity to grow is in the face of adversity, adversarialness. Goodness gracious, pardon me. It would logically follow then that a breeding ground of hostility would end up becoming a place for the best ideologies to take root, if, and only if, people are willing to see the other person's perspective and to understand fully, or as fully as they can, the other person's perspective. The ideal would be a room full of people who are the experts in their craft, explaining their ideologies, what makes them tick, what makes their version of reality ideal to them, and why it should be ideal to us, even though it isn't at current. That would be how we end up creating a better future, in my opinion. That's the closest thing that I can think of to something that would make sense to leading the world to a better place than it is right now. Because as it stands, we've got people who all push for their ideas, none willing to back down, because they think that their idea is just the way it is. At least that's my understanding of how things are. This is, once again, why I'm not in politics, because I basically have an amateur's level grasp of these theories, these ideologies, and it's unfair for a non-master to get up on the plinth and preach that they know what is correct. But I'm also still in my own unique search for knowledge, truth, and all that follows. It's a really weird place to be. It's like I'm sitting on the precipice of change, as are we all. We're all sitting here staring into a veritable abyss, and the abyss stares back, of course, but what do you see? You see what your mind tells you you need to see, in lieu of knowing that you can't actually see anything. It tries to create things in that darkness. It tries to put together pieces of something recognizable. There's something sinister in the way your mind works. At a very basic level, we're all animalistic. We need to recognize that a lot of the time, the monsters are within us, rather than outside of us. And the fears that we have are largely unwarranted. But those fears also cause people to do things that they wouldn't normally to do. Fear in and of itself. I try and say nothing should be motivated by fear in my daily life. And then I realize a lot of the time fear is the only motivator that will make some people do anything, let alone the right thing. And then the question ends up becoming, well, what is right? Is what is right dictated by where you live, who you are? Is there some universal truth that we could all follow? I don't think so. I don't know. That's not really a question that I have the answer for. And what would we do even if we were to find that truth? Because more often than not, you tell people exactly what they need to know and they'll rebel against it. How do you construct an idea in a way that other people think that they came up with it? I guess that's the idea behind Inception, isn't it? And what are the moral repercussions of that? Is it wrong to create an idea in somebody's head that influences them to better themselves if it would have previously been against their own will? Or is that too abstract of a concept to fall on any particular pages of the government, the legislature, as it were, in current? Is there ruling for the subconscious? Should there be ruling for the subconscious? Currently, a lot of the time, thought crime is a fine and unregulated thing. Doesn't matter how many times you think horrible things that people should never do, as long as you don't do them. Should that be legally allowed to think very loudly but not act on something? What ends up being the line between somebody thinking something for X amount of minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, years, and actually acting on something? Is there such thing as a blurred line between reality and ideas? A lot of people would say that the difference is verbal. What I'm doing right now. These thoughts that have been circulating around in my mind, being able to escape in the form of words. People would argue that humans don't think by thinking. They think by expressing. They think by speaking. They think by writing. They think by art. They think by doing. And then the question is, who are you? Are you you, or are you what you express? And if there's a disparity between the two, which there inevitably will be, there's always a disparity. Nobody's perfect. You can say, I believe this, I act this way, but you've still got enough in you that you feel the need to rebel against it. You've got some of the staunchest people against homosexuality are closeted homosexuals because they're ashamed of their own ideologies. What makes an ideology something that you want to fight for? Especially if it's something that you don't believe in. Why do we believe or not believe what we believe? And what makes us think that we can or cannot fight for those ideologies? Is it because of society? And if your society ends up being something that says that you can't fight for what you believe in, are you a failure of your society, or do you simply belong to a different society? We are a very privileged people in the first world in that we have the choice of saying, okay, well, I belong to a different society. I'm just going to go to that society. Others, if they are different from what their society says is correct, are just punished in various and sundry different ways. Kind of disturbing when you think about it. That's why a lot of people don't think about it. What you don't know can't hurt you. Well, except strictly speaking, that's not true. You can't know necessarily that an airdrop's going to be landing on your house. Is it going to hurt you? Can death be considered hurtful to people who are then dead if nobody is left to mourn? These are the kinds of questions that most people don't ask, and I can't say that I blame them, and I don't even feel correct in asking them myself. I just I don't even know how I got here. I don't know how any of us got here now that I think about it. Were we just an accident? Just a series of coincidences? What I would probably put forward as an idea. Yeah, humankind was never really meant to be what it is. And judging by the way things are going, we could potentially breed a new species of sentient beings. It's largely understood that the primary difference between us and our closest next ancestors, the primates, isn't necessarily the generalized intelligence, as they are currently in what we would consider the Stone Age. It is their ability to realize that there is such a thing as the future and plan accordingly. They are smart enough to relay to us information of things that have happened in the past, recognize the past, talk uniquely about things that we did not know about the past from their perspective. It's phenomenally intelligent compared to what we had thought in them. But they are yet to acknowledge that there is such a thing as a future. They are only living in the now, and some would argue that that is an idealized version of reality as well. If you didn't have to worry about the future, how many questions and problems and theories would have just stopped eroding people's minds? But that erosion, that spark, that drive, that grind, those are all the things that I would argue make people human. If we didn't have those things, if we couldn't acknowledge them anymore, I feel we would cease to be who we are. It really makes you think. It really makes you wonder what drives you. What, at a very basic level, drives you. You say, I want to be a good person, but there's no such thing as good. There's no universal good. So what is good? It's good is based off of where you stand. Is it good to protect your family? Yeah. Well, how far will you go to do that? Will you end up forsaking everything you thought you knew to grow and theoretically become a stronger person, to protect people who may or may not actually understand or be able to comprehend why you are doing what you're doing.